Hello there. We're starting with a quote today. I'll read it in Spanish and translate to English. Cuanto más lees, más sabes. You read more and you know more. Cuanto más sabes, más creces. When you know more, you grow more. Cuanto más creces, más peso tiene tu voz. When you grow more, your voice weighs heavier cuando dices lo que sabes o expresas tu decisión. It weighs heavier, your voice, as you say what you know and you express your decision. Thank you so much for joining me on this North Form transmission. So, the question is, religion. Is Bushido, is it still alive? The march of the West through our land. Did it wipe out every trace of our ancient discipline? No. But it was sad that the nation's soul could die that fast. It was a poor soul that could succumb so easily to extraneous influences. The aggregate of psychological elements constituting national character is as tenacious as the irreducible elements of species, of the fins of the fish, of the beak of the bird, of the tooth of the carnivorous animal. In his recent book, we have Le Bon asseverating on the discoveries due to the intelligence, our common patrimony of humanity, qualities or defects of character constituting exclusive patrimony of each people. They are firm rocks which waters must wash day by day, and centuries before they can wear away even the external asperities. The words are worth pondering over. Schematizing theories have been advanced long before this transmission, and they exploded long ago with Theodore Waits and Hugh Murray, studying the various virtues instilled by this ancient tradition, Bushido. We've drawn upon European sources, of course, but it's an aggregate of moral qualities that have a unique aspect. It's what Emerson called a compound resulted from which great force enters as an ingredient. But it's not the exclusive patrimony of a race or people. Instead, it's a concord philosopher. It's an element which unites forcible persons of every country to make intelligent agreements with each other, and is so precise that it was once felt as an individual lack of a, quote, Masonic sign. The character Bushido stamped on the nation, and on the samurai in particular, cannot be said to form an irreducible element of species, but nevertheless, it's vital in its retention, no doubt. Bushido, a mere physical force, maybe the momentum it's gained in the last 700 years, could not stop so abruptly. Were it transmitted only by heredity, its influence immensely widespread. Just think, as Miss Chasson, economist français, calculated, supposing generations in a century, 3. Each of us would have veins in the blood of 20 million of the people living in the year AD 1000. Merest peasants grubbing the soil, bowed by the weight of centuries, has in the veins the blood of ages, and is thus brother to us as much as to the ox. an unconscious and irresistible power. It's been moving through nations and individuals. It's a confession, honest, of the race. But unformulated, it is and was and still is the animating spirit, the motor force of country. Quote, full well I knew this course must end in death. It was Yamato, the spirit that urged me on to dare whatever that betides. So there's three distinct things happening with the old and the new, and then the hardly yet born spirit, the transition passing through the critical, quote, throes, the critical throes. We are thrown into this world. It's very true. We regard tangible and concrete institutions and statements as applied to fundamental ethical notions, requiring perhaps modification here. Bushido, old Japan of a product, is still guiding principle of the transitions and will prove a formative force of this new era. Great statesmen who steered the ship of the state through the hurricane of the Restoration and the national rejuvenation were men who knew no other moral teaching than the precepts of, quote, knighthood. Some writers have lately tried to prove that the Christian missionaries contributed an appreciable quota to the making of New Japan. I would fain render honor to whom honor is due, but this honor can as yet hardly be accorded to those good missionaries. More fitting it will be to the profession sticking to the scriptural injunction of preferring one another in honor than to advocate a claim in which we have no proofs to back. For myself, Christian missionaries perhaps do great things in Japan in the domain of education, maybe moral education, only the mysterious though not less certain working is still hidden in divine secrecy. Whatever they do is still of indirect effect. No, they have little visible effect molding the character of New Japan. It was Bushido, pure and simple, urging us from weal or from woe. And if you open Saigo, Sakuma, Kido, Okubo, they mention the reminiscences of living men like Ito, Okumo, Itagaki. And it was this impetus of samuraihood that they thought and they wrought. And Henry Norman declared, observing the Far East, that only in respect in which Japan differed from other Oriental despotisms lay in the, quote, ruling influence among her people of the strictest, loftiest, and most punctilious codes of honor that man ever has devised, touching mainsprings which New Japan doesn't quite know, but yet which will make her destined what she will be. The transformation of Japan is, in fact, patent to the whole world into a work of such magnitude. Varies motives naturally and are entered, but if one were to name the principle, one would not hesitate to name this Bushido. And we opened the country, Japan, to foreign trade. We introduced the latest improvements in every department of life. When we began studying Western politics and sciences, our guiding motive was not the development of our physical resources and the increase of wealth, much less it was a blind imitation of Western customs. But a close observer has written, quote, we're told every day how Europe has influenced Japan and forget that the change in those islands was self-generated. Europeans did not teach Japan. Japan of herself chose to learn from Europe the methods of organization, military and civil, which have so far proved successful. Importing European mechanical science, as the Turks did years before artillery imported from Europe. It's not exactly influence, unless indeed England is influenced by purchasing tea from China. Whereas the European apostle asks, our philosopher or statesman or agitator, who has remade Japan? Mr. Townsend has well perceived that the spring of action which brought about the changes in Japan were entirely within our own selves, and we had not probed into our psychology, but keen powers of observation easily convinced us the spring was no other than Bushido. The sense of honor cannot bear without being looked down upon, for example, as inferior power, was the strongest of motives, in fact. Pecuniary or industrial considerations awakened later in the process of transformation. Bushido influenced so palpably that he who runs may read. Japanese life, we can get a glimpse into it and make it manifest. We can read Hearn, the most eloquent and truthful of the mind Japanese, and we can see the workings of Bushido, universal politeness of the people, a legacy of knightly ways, too well known to be repeated anew, physical endurance, fortitude, and bravery that is possessed, sufficiently proved, for example, in the Chino-Japanese War. Any nation more loyal and patriotic is there? A question asked many, with the proud answer being, there is not. We must thank, in fact, the precepts of knighthood. But we can recognize the faults and defects of our character. And Bushido is also largely responsible. But it's our lack of abstruse philosophy. But young men have gained international reputation in scientific researches. Not one, though, has achieved anything in philosophical lines. It's traceable to the neglect of the metaphysical training under the regime of Bushido education. Our sense of honor is responsible for our exaggerated sensitiveness and touchiness. And if there is the conceit in us with which some foreigners charge us, that too is a pathological outcome of honor. Deep-rooted and powerful as is still the effect of Bushido, I've said it, in an unconscious and mute influence. People, their heart, they respond, without knowing reasons why, to any appeal made to what was inherited, and hence the same moral idea, now expressed newly with Bushido, but in old terms, vastly differentiating in its correct efficacy. But a backsliding Christian, maybe, whom no pastoral persuasion could help from downward tendency, reverted from a course by an appeal made to this loyalty, the fidelity he once swore to a master. The word loyalty revived the noble sentiments that were permitted to grow lukewarm. Unruly youths, a party engaged in a long-continued student strike on colleges and accounts for their dissatisfaction with certain teachers, for example, disbanded. 2 questions put by the director, quote, is your professor a worthy character? Is your professor of worthy character? If so, you ought to respect him and keep him in the school. Is he weak? If so, it's not manly to push a falling man. The scientific incapacity of the professor was the beginning of the trouble, dwindled into insignificance in comparison with the moral issues hinted at. By arousing sentiments nurtured by Bushido, moral renovation of great magnitude can be accomplished. One cause of the failure is that the missionaries are ignorant of the history. What do we care for heathen records, some say? And they estrange their religion from the habits of thought forefathers had accustomed us for centuries past, mocking our nation's history as though the career of any people, even of the lowest, for example, African savages possessing no record, were not a page in the general history of mankind, written by the hand of God himself. Yet, ignoring those past careers of people, missionaries claim that Christianity is a new religion, whereas, to this mind, it's an old story, which, intelligently presented, is a moral development of people. to find easy lodgment in their hearts, irrespective of race or nationality. Christianity in its American or English form, with more Anglo-Saxon freaks and fancies than grace and purity of its founder, is a poor scion to graft on Bushido stock. The propagator of this new faith uprooted the entire stock, root, and branches that plant the seeds of the gospel of this ravaged soil. Such heroic process may be possible in Hawaii, where it's alleged the church militant had complete success amassing spoils of wealth itself and annihilating the Aboriginal race. That process is most decidedly impossible in Japan. Nay, it's a process which Jesus himself would never have adopted in founding this kingdom on earth. It behoves us to take more heart to the following words of a saintly man, a devout Christian, a profound scholar. Quote, "Men have divided the world into heathen and Christian, without considering how much good may have been hidden in the one, or how much evil may have been mingled with the other. They compared the best part of themselves with the worst part of their neighbors, the Christian ideal with the corruption of Greece or of the East. They've not aimed at impartiality, but have been contented to accumulate all that has been said in praise of their own and in dispraise of other forms of religion. But whatever may be the error committed by individuals, there's little doubt that the fundamental principle religion professes a power which we must take into account in reckoning the future. Days seem numbered already, and signs ominous in the air of a broken and a betoken future. Not only signs, but redoubtable forces are at work, threatening it." Thank you so much, Nitobe Inazo, for your words on the way of the samurai. I highly recommend a book called The Peaceful Warrior. I don't currently recall the author, but that's a fantastic book. Now, these words are difficult to comprehend, and this transmission is not something that is meant to be immediately understood or assimilated, as many profound experiences be the case. However, it is my knowledge and awareness that this process is one of the divine universal evolution and will serve to further all things. Thank you.